Hello BookTube, I'm still Roz and this is still my channel, A Journey Through Books. So this video is just going to be a very quick reading wrap up. As I said in my last video, I have not been reading a lot, I have been marking a lot. I might not have read a lot of pages that have been published, but I've read a lot of other pages. Unfortunately, they don't count towards one's reading goals, because if they did, man, I would be so far ahead. But I'm not. I'm on the mad chase to do some major catch-up, because school's knock off on Friday and we then have 2 glorious weeks of holiday coming up. So I'm really looking forward to that. I wonder if you're surprised. But anyway, so let's get on with the wrap-up. The first book that I'm going to talk about is non-fiction, and this one was a recommendation, I think 2 years ago, from Olive at a Book Olive, and this is The Man Without a Face, The Unlikely Rise of Vladimir Putin. And man, this was a very, very interesting read. A bit of a scary read, I must admit. It did kind of creep into my dreams a bit there, and yeah, I will say that there was a reason why KGB fiction was brilliant to read. It was gripping, as were my dreams. But getting back to the point of this. So Masha Gessen, sorry, she gives you a bit of a background history on Russia, and she starts off explaining how Putin got in. And the one thing that is very obvious in this book is that there is very little to be known about him. That probably does come from his KGB background, that he has had the ability to squash anything that he doesn't want to have known. But it's even questioned as to whether his parents really were his parents. So this was a very interesting read. It covers the political side. It covers a lot of the scandal and corruption that has happened since he's been in power, and even while he was not for 6 years. Yeah, I have a few issues with this. The one is that you can clearly see her prejudice, and I don't fault her for having prejudice. I don't think that I could write a biography about certain politicians here, or other places actually, come to think of it, without my prejudice coming through. But because of that, I found her footnote system ineffective. And the reason I say that is that there are no numbers anywhere through these pages. But at the back, there is notes, or biography, let's call it that. And what she's done is she just has the page number and then a few phrases of before she gives you the reference. And I mean, it's still functional, but it made reading it more complicated, because to read it properly, I felt that I needed to keep my finger in the notes and keep scanning to see what phrases she then mentions in the bibliography, to then see where the references came in. I did it quite religiously, I'd say, for the first 3 quarters, and then the last quarter I kind of skipped that. But it didn't, I mean, it wasn't a very effective method, let's put it that way. It made it a lot more PT on my side as the reader. And as I said, because you could see that she was prejudiced, I felt that one had to check the notes. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying she shouldn't be prejudiced. I would not be able to write this without being prejudiced. But, you know, it's also, I suppose, because I do not have that much knowledge about events, etc., that have happened in Russia. The news around here is not very effective, especially back in the days pre-internet, in going into international affairs, etc. So, you know, if it wasn't on the news, we didn't hear about it, and if it wasn't on the news, I don't know if there was a way to hear about it. I mean, it might have been somewhere buried deep in newspapers, but we didn't get those. My dad read the paper at work, so why buy a second copy? So anyway, yeah, I felt that because I lacked so much knowledge that I needed those footnotes. So yeah, I also ended up hitting Google a lot, I'll tell you that. She made me very interested in things that had happened, and yeah, it was effective. I've learned a lot. There's a gap in between, because I read a bibliography on Stalin, and that was very enlightening. And I've read Putin, so I need to find out that spot in between the two and figure out what happened there in more detail. So the next book I want to talk about comes straight from home, and this is Zakes, The Madonna of Excelsior. Zakes is an African author, and this is the first book of his that I've read, and I was really, really impressed. A brief synopsis of the story is to do with, well, you've all read Born a Crime, I'm sure by now, but Trevor Noah, so that you know of the Moralities Act here, or the Immoralities Act here in South Africa, where you could not have black people and white people having a conjugal relationship because that was seen as immoral. And in this town of Excelsior in the Orange Free State, as it was known back then, nowadays it's just the Free State, there were 19 cases of a violation of the Moralities Act. And this story follows, first of all, the mom, Nikki, who was one of the culprits, and her daughter, who was what we would consider in this country colored, which means that she is basically mixed race. Yeah. So anyway, and after you followed Nikki, then you follow her daughter Poppy. And it's actually a very interesting story, but it starts off, as I said, during apartheid. I think it starts in the early 70s where this happened. It was before TV came to South Africa. So TV did exist. Journalists, etc., came from other parts in the world to film this. But it then ends a couple of years into the ANC rule. So the way he did this was very interesting. At the beginning of every chapter, he describes what I think would be considered a Norwegian expressionist style painting that is supposed to have been done by a Catholic priest in the story. You don't really spend too much time with him. You see him briefly, well, a few chapters in the beginning and then very briefly towards the end. And he starts off with describing a painting at the beginning of every chapter, and then he carries on with the story. And one of the things that I think made this work so well, besides the fact that it was sometimes a bit confusing to figure out what the connection was, sometimes I didn't really figure out what the connection was, but by then I just really wanted to go to bed and read, sleep, because marking. And so one of the things that I think worked really well with this was that these paintings used such bright colors. Now, this has always been one of the questions that I have. I'm an English major and I'm an English teacher. So symbolism is something that I read for and I look out for. But I always wonder if sometimes we're reading too much into things. So a lot of the pictures use exceptionally bright colors. Black, white are there as well, but you have red, blue, yellow and green, which is the new South African flag. And I don't know if this was intentional or not. I mean, there's a part in the middle where everything is very orangey and, with the burnt siennas, etc. And that was the old South African flag, mixed with blue and white. So I don't know if this was intentional or not. And then towards the end again, then the colors became very bright and vivid and very similar to the new South African flag again, or exactly like the new South African flag. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, because there are other paintings where there are pinks and purples and colors like that. So, am I reading too much into it? I don't know. The one thing I would like to also talk about, it might be a little bit of a spoiler, but it's not really for the story, but the priest who had been painting all of these pictures, when Poppy goes and sees him right towards the end, he's an old man in his 80s and he's no longer painting anymore in color, but he's doing charcoal, which is black and white. And I thought it was very interesting that, the color was there in the past, and I don't know, it was almost as though the change of government made one more aware of the color. I don't know. But I just thought that was interesting. You never got to see any of the black and white pictures, well, sketches, like you saw the paintings. But it was an interesting touch, and it's made me curious. I would like to give it a bit more thought. I only finished it about an hour ago. Yeah, today I sat down and read. Oh, it was lovely. I sat down, I did some reading after I went book shopping, which you've already seen. Anyway, so that was my minuscule reading wrap-up. I'm going to now go and see about finding some mysteries, because I need to unwind and relax and find something fun to do, and I'm really in the mood for some crime fiction, because that's my rest and blah blah. That's my rest and unwind kind of read. And yeah, I'm going to be filming some tags as well soon, so hopefully I will get those out as well. Thanks to all the folks that have tagged me. I have seen it. I hope if I've commented, I've seen. If I haven't, I'll find you. I'm still going through all these videos that I've missed out on. Anyway, before I waffle on, happy reading, everyone. Bye for now.